We are now in section 2, value streams and processes dimension for the service level management practice. This is also a long section like section 1, the key concepts, whereas from section 3 onwards, the 4 dimensions of the service management covered in those sections, and also followed by the capability model for the practice and the recommendations of practice success. Those are much shorter sections. And there will be 5 questions from this topic in the exam out of the 20 questions, which is a good number. Just like the previous section 1, the key concepts also will have 5 questions in the exam out of the 20. Therefore, together, section 1 and 2, the key concepts and this value streams and processes will make up 10 of the 20 questions. So these are going to be important ones for good preparation, because most of the material are in section 1 and 2. And section 2, let me alert you, it's going to be a bit academic here because it's about various process diagrams, process inputs, outputs, and activities, and having to understand those inputs, outputs, and activities. In the practice guide, you will not see an explanation of each of the inputs or the outputs. There will be explanation only of the activities. So you need to also reflect on what those inputs might really mean, though I'm going to explain that to you in any case. But you need to think about those inputs from your own work environment perspectives. They may be named in a different way rather than using the ITIL terminology as is. So these 5 questions will be a mix of Bloom's level 2 and 3. So there'll be some understanding questions and some application questions. We don't know the exact split between them, but the process questions for the inputs, activities, and outputs will be at the level 2, Bloom's level 2 understanding level, whereas the value stream questions will be at Bloom's level 3, the application question. Now, we don't know the split, as I said, how many process questions and how many value stream questions. Together, it'll be 5. So the syllabus is exactly as I mentioned earlier in a slightly different way. We need to understand the inputs, outputs, and activities of the processes, and also understand how this practice works along with other practices in a value stream. Meaning, how does this practice really contribute to a specific value stream, and what are the various value streams this practice can contribute to? There are 2 processes in the service level management practice. It's the first one is the management of SLAs, that's a process name. And the second one is the oversight of the service levels and service quality. So briefly here, the first process, it's about the creation of the service level agreements. And the second one is actually the usage of those agreements to oversee the service levels being achieved and the service quality being achieved. So the first one, let's get into that. Management of SLAs. This is focused on the SLAs themselves, the agreements, and their life cycle. So we have the process diagram, like a table. We see the inputs, activities, and outputs. So because this is a process to define the service level agreement, the management of that as well. So the key outputs here are the documented service level requirements. And based on that, the draft SLA and the signed SLA or SLAs, and onboarding communications for that the SLAs are going to be implemented or has been implemented using certain resources and certain IT infrastructure. And there may be some requests for change needed to make those changes to the current environment based on certain service level targets to be achieved as per customers' expectations. And when certain SLAs are withdrawn, no longer needed by the customer, they will be withdrawn. And what are the activities here? These are, first of all, to define the customer's requirements, then perform the viability analysis. The service provider would verify whether the customer's expectations can really be met or not. Do they have the resources and capability to do that? That's called the viability analysis. And once that looks okay, then the drafting of the SLA would occur. And again, this is done together by the provider and the customer, stakeholders from both sides. Then the SLA would be negotiated. And once it is okay, agreed, then it is communicated to all the key stakeholders and enabled, meaning the SLA is actually implemented using specific processes to be running, specific infrastructure capacity, availability, etc., or information security requirements, whatever. And then periodically there would be an SLA review of this is not the review of the service level achievement for specific services, This is more reviewing the overall service level agreement. Do we need changes to that, or is it okay as it is? It's mainly that. So watch out for this one in particular, the SLA review phrase or the words here. SLA prolongation, the next means if the service levels are okay, both parties are happy with it, they may continue with the same SLA. That's called prolongation. And withdrawal means if certain targets are no longer needed, they will be removed, and that's called the SLA withdrawal. It may even happen that the entire agreement may be withdrawn for some reason. For example, the service ends its life cycle, or the customer may not prefer to have the service anymore from that provider, in the worst case. The inputs, therefore, need to be understood in a logical way or using some sense reasoning for this input. So customer requirements will be key inputs as part of the discussions. The service catalog in terms of what services are being provided by the provider. The customer will take a look at them, and they will have to conclude or confirm which services they are interested in. And then the service specifications for each of those services. And that will be, it'll be part of the catalog. What are the functionalities and the warranties of the service that is being provided by the service provider to various customers as part of the catalog. Then the service models and the configuration. Yes, it's basically about how various services are being configured, because that will be needed to do the viability checks, whether certain targets of service quality can be met or not. Then agreements with suppliers and partners. The provider will need certain agreements with their own third parties before they can sign an SLA with their customer. And there'll be dependency on the provider's agreement with their contracts with their own third parties in order for them to deliver the SLAs to their customer. Then there would be user and customer feedback regarding maybe existing performance of the agreements, not the performance of services, but general feedback about whether these SLAs are sufficient or not okay, and so on. Then improvement plans and registers for various organizational improvements to services. And again, some of these inputs are needed when the SLAs are going to be reviewed. Particularly the SLA review will require the user and customer feedback for any improvements to the agreements process or to the agreement themselves. And then the improvement plans and registers, it could be from other practices also, which can impact the service level agreement and other financial information, because if the SLAs are more stringent and tight, additional budgeting may be needed. In the exam, you may have questions about any of these inputs or outputs for these processes, and also the need to describe what happens within a specific activity.